My name is Adam Golov, Marketing and Communications Manager at Data Conversion Laboratory, and I will be your moderator today. Before we get started, I wanted to let you know we will allow time at the end of the webinar for questions and answers, so please write your questions in the chat area as they come to mind. If we don't have time to answer them all, we will make them available on our website. Next slide, please. For those of you who are not familiar with DCL, we convert and organize content to create electronic documents, populate databases, publish on the web, and basically get it ready for tomorrow's technology. Next slide, please. DCL services help you refine your document conversion strategy, identify document redundancy, extract metadata, and transform legacy and future documents for real needs, today and in the future. Next slide, please. DCL serves a broad client base. Next slide, please. Spanning all industries. Today, we are thrilled to introduce Charles Cooper, Vice President of the Rockley Group. Without further ado, welcome, Charles.
Hello there, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are today. My name is Charles Cooper. I am indeed the Vice President of the Rockley Group. I spent over 30 years now, it's a frightening number to me, in the information business, starting with hardware and software design of computers, taking healthcare diagnostic information and healthcare diagnostic tools and products from design through manufacturing and eventually into market. And I spent over 20 years documenting all of this stuff, sort of in the content end of it. I'm absolutely fascinated by how we tell stories to each other, how we gather the information, how we figure out what we want to do with what we have, and how we get it out to other people. And I mentioned here I have a large and growing collection of e-toys to test different methods of e-publishing because, excuse me, one of the challenges we always have with our content these days is it's not just going out to paper. There are many ways of, many modalities of publishing, and they're all slightly different. And in theory, you can emulate everything. In practice, I find that it's a good thing to actually test the reality and test those emulations. So I have something I call my digital petting zoo, a 1.5 foot thick stack of tablets and whatnot that I get to play with on a regular basis. And I am definitely having some problems getting to the next page here. There we are. What we do with the Rockley Group is we work with companies in the pharma space, medical devices, high technology, finance, manufacturing. They translate information. They publish information on a wide variety of devices, including paper, but also all sorts of mobile things. We help them create intelligent content strategies to help them organize their information so that it can be used and reused in all of these different places and for different audiences. And that really requires some kind of what we call a component content management. It's not document management. We're looking at going deeper, much more granular than that. So we help them organize and structure that sort of information. These are the sort of companies we work with. A friend of mine once joked, because those are the people who have money. But no, it's really those are the people who have the information that they need to manage on a regular basis. Mobile is an interesting thing. We talk about mobile like it's absolutely brand new, but it's been around for a while. I mean, in internet time, 2011 was when the rise of what I think of as the rise of mobile, because smartphones and tablets, the sales exceeded that of PCs, and that's going on for 4 years now. So that's a long time. The mobile web is huge, particularly in the developing nations. Within the last year, within India, Nigeria, and Bangladesh, we had a 67% growth in internet mobile traffic within those 3 areas. It's an interesting thing here, something I will talk about later. I'll be giving you some statistics to back all of this up that you can use to talk to people. But keep in mind that what we're looking at here really is trends. There was an interesting article in The Economist 2 weeks ago where two large metrics companies had analyzed effectively the same information or their own information to answer a particular question, and all their numbers were very, very different. The trends, however, were very similar, and that's what I'm getting from all of this. We're getting more and more mobile. For example, we see here on the map that Greenland, strangely, has a huge rise in mobile in the last year. Greenland has a very small population that probably meant 20 people bought new smartphones. So you have to take all of these numbers and everything with a grain of salt, but recognize it's the trends that are important from one to the other. So, when we talk about mobile, one of the big questions is, what does mobile mean to you? Years ago, it used to be really easy. It was mobile if you could carry it. You didn't even have to be able to run it when it was being moved. As long as you could carry it, that was regarded as a mobile device. This is my Osborne computer, Osborne 1 from 1982, if I recall correctly. It was $1,800, and it weighed 20-odd pounds. Something I carried on the subway. I don't regard that as mobile, and you shouldn't either. We talk about 5 types of mobile information delivery. The first is what we think of as traditional web, the stuff that was designed to appear on laptops and desktops and similar things, things that you could move but probably didn't. The mobile aware web, that's effectively anything that was designed or is designed to run on a small screen. That's absolutely key. You can use adaptive and responsive technologies and blends of those, but it's effectively something that's designed to be viewed on a small screen. Web apps, which are similar, but it's effectively a specialized browser that lives on a small screen and then goes out to the web for actual information. E-books, Kindle and EPUB and variants and iBooks and all of those things. Some people don't consider those mobile, but they are, because they're really nothing. An EPUB and an iBook, which is a variant of that, they are really nothing more than a web page that's been packaged in a particular way to be read on a specific device. So that's also mobile. And of course, the native applications that you might be looking at. So these are all mobile things, and everyone is using mobile. A lot of what you see mobile use is actually being done for games and wasting time when you're standing in a queue, but it's also used for real things, and companies are developing for it. So for example, we have here a company called Azoy, who is, well, hopefully this winter will be releasing this iPhone case. It also works on Android, not as a case, but as a standalone device that allows you, by holding it in a particular way and covering the sensors, to take your ECG, your heart rate, your blood oxygen level, all of these various things through a mobile app, the information which then can be shared with your doctor. Now, it's not FDA approved, but it's something that they are working on. So people are getting fairly comfortable with using mobile, not just to waste time, but to actually do useful things with. And it's interesting that they're not just willing to play with apps, but they do research on the web. This is from a Manhattan Research, is one of their reports a couple of years ago, where you can see that your average consumer is quite happy to utilize the web for research. Now, I find it interesting down in the bottom left-hand side, we have things like high cholesterol, high blood pressure, and osteoporosis. These are things that people are not using the mobile web in particular to look for. They're not looking the mobile web to find this information, and I'm wondering if it's not, they're not interested in it, but it's simply that due to socioeconomic status and or age, these may be problems that people have, that these people are not particularly comfortable with using the web or perhaps even using mobile devices. So once again, all of these statistics are useful, but you have to think about the root cause behind them. The key, though, is that more people are quite happy, more people than not are quite happy to use their devices to find out information about whatever disease they have or what they're dealing with. Now, it's not just people looking for information. You have organizations who are doing research and long-term studies. Pfizer is partnering with a game designer to produce this game that runs on a number of mobile devices called Project Evo. And what they're doing is they're tracking people's, this is clinical trial type stuff where they're actually doing research. And what they're actually doing is they're tracking people with their knowledge to see how what their cognition is like, what their motor skills are like over time. It's gamified. People can play with it, and it's apparently a lot of fun to play. But the key is they're actually using mobile for research. Healthcare professionals use the web a lot. Now, we can see here that there's all sorts of online sources that they use, and they're very widely used. Almost 70% use pharma product websites. A lot of people watch promotional programs, websites for healthcare professionals, all sorts of different things that they're looking at, but a lot of it is online. They're not stopping to use offline. They're still using it. 54% of healthcare professionals said that they regularly use print professional journals rather than the online. But on the other hand, it's getting fairly obvious that this is the trend we're looking at, is the use over time has decreased in terms of the paper and is increasing in terms of the online, to the point that last year Stanford Medical School issued iPads with everything to all of their new medical students. It's just, here's your dorm room, here's your iPad. We expect you to use this to research and whatnot. So it's just something that is happening. People are using them more, and it's becoming expected. And the other key thing here is that not only are our patients and prospective patients and healthcare professionals using them separately, they're using mobile devices together. 30% of patients said that their doctor used a mobile device. Now, we're hoping they're not playing Angry Birds or actually researching things, but that wasn't entirely clear as a joke was made in the report. If the doctor is using a mobile device, the patient will use the mobile device, and they actually compare. And when they compare, when they have that interaction, that information that they can share and point to each other and ask questions, they're 80% more likely to switch medications, hopefully to something that is more useful to them, when both of them are sort of dueling Wikipedia or dueling WebMD or whatever. So it is a useful thing for both groups. There's also the rise of apps. Orca Health has an app that enables people to, enables a doctor, rather than playing on a whiteboard or scribbling something, that shows problems with spinal health. They have a number of apps. This is just one that I've used, and it's really quite good. It has animations. It shows how things work. You can show the patient what the problems are internally, like this is what's happening to you. You can go to the next level, and there are animations that you can show cutaways of what it looks like inside and why they're having the problem, why they're having the pain. You can give all of this information to them. You can explain it to them and let them walk through it and read through it, answer their questions based on that. And as a doctor, you can actually take notes and provide those notes within their copy of the app so that they can have some extra sort of reading material, understanding material at home, so that they can feel more engaged in their own their healthcare, which we've known is a real issue. Now, there's all sorts of new technologies. There's big companies and small companies. There's one called Technical Illusions is working on a product that will enable you to see a projected 3D image in free space. So you don't need to have a QR code type thing to look at it. You don't need virtual reality, materials and windows. This is something that displays on a material that looks a little bit like the stuff they make retro-reflective vests with. They can project a 3D image, and you can walk through the image, turn it around, view slices from an MRI, all within this particular system. And this is a small startup company in California. And we're starting to see on the healthcare professional side, from the big companies, we're starting to see work done with integrated mobile systems. Now, this is a very short video, which I will show. I don't normally show an awful lot of videos, but I do hope this will work. No. Effectively, what happens is within this system, you have a doctor. It actually starts off with, within the video, it starts off with someone has a problem. They make a 911 call. The EMS people come out. They call back into the hospital with the information, the vitals, the problems, their initial diagnosis. It goes to a doctor who sees the information on a heads-up display so he can get as much as possible. He can go in, talk to the patient, see how they're doing, do some diagnosis there. He can send a video to a second person to do some work. If they've done some previous work, if they have a history with this patient, they can look at it. That person can call it up. They're looking at a brain scan here, and she recommends something. The doctor who's in the emergency room looks at it and does a bit of coordination with the other physician, and then it can give some reassurance to the patient that we know what's going on, we're looking at it. And the idea is all of the patient's records are available to the doctor, in this case wearing the Google Glass, and they can see all of that, and everything ties together. He gets the information he needs. He can send it to people if he needs it, get more feedback, and ultimately can reassure the patient that things are actually looking up. And now you look at this, you think, well, that sounds great. Well, in real life, a lower level of this is actually happening. This is a quote from a guy who calls himself the Geek Doctor. He is a practicing emergency physician at the Harvard Medical School. He's the Chief Information Officer for Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This is a real doctor who's implementing this in real life right now. I don't normally read things that are on this, but I will read this particular one. When a clinician walks into an emergency department room, he or she looks at a barcode, a QR, a quick response code placed on the wall. Wearable intelligence software running on Google Glass immediately recognizes the room, and the ED dashboard, that's their in-house information system, sends information about the patient in that room to the glasses, which appears in the clinic's field of vision. The clinician can speak with the patient, examine the patient, and perform procedures while seeing problems, vital signs, lab results, and other data. This is someone who's actually working with the thing that I showed you earlier. It's not 100% exactly as it would be shown in the video, but they are definitely moving towards this. So this type of mobile medical information transfer, medical records within the field is happening now. But of course there are challenges. As I say here, there are so many devices. These are the sort of devices where your information, you're either expected to document them or display your content on them. There's wearables, there's carryables, things that are embedded such as the insulin pump or portions of the insulin pump, consumer things, physician, there's all sorts of stuff that we're trying to either document or provide our documentation on. And as our dear friend Big Bird from Children's Sesame Street, as I used to think of it as Children's Television Workshop, is one of these things is not like the other. Nothing is like the other. There's so many devices, there's different audiences, there are different modalities, there are countries and regulations, languages. All of these things are something that you have to deal with. New techniques are discovered. New techniques are tested and used. There are new products that must be documented. We have to translate all of this stuff. You've got more countries as your products are released. Things are being released constantly. There's so much churn, we cannot keep up. We cannot handcraft information. It's simply not possible, unfortunately. So what do? Well, the key thing with this is that we have to plan ahead. That is absolutely key. This is sort of a riff on the old 1950s IBM poster. You have to plan ahead because you absolutely cannot make this stuff up as you go along. Imagine trying to get all of this information for all of these different people without a plan. It simply doesn't work. You need what we call an intelligent content strategy. But an intelligent content strategy, despite the fact that we're talking about mobile, is not a mobile content strategy because that doesn't work. Mobile is just another way of getting your information out there. It's effectively publishing. You'll hear a user-first strategy, paper first, content first, marketing first, all of these firsts. Well, they're all important. I mean, obviously the user is important and the content is more important than the way you put it out there, but the real thing is it absolutely has to be a balanced strategy where nothing takes 100% primacy over everything else. You have all of these different needs, these difficult problems and requirements, and you have to be able to balance that. Now, ideally, the intelligent content strategy starts right at the beginning when you're creating a new product or you have a new idea. You probably already have products, you have things, you have stuff that you're documenting, stuff that you're managing and maintaining on a regular basis. So you don't try to boil the ocean. What you do is you identify a group or a product or a division who needs this most or who needs this on an ongoing basis. And they hopefully are at the beginning of something, so you can think about this for the future. What you need to do is you need to think small, act small initially, but then move it out across the different groups. Because if you try to do everything at once, that won't really work. But the key is you don't want to restrict that to one group in the long term. You don't want it, for the people who are creating it or publishing or translating it. And I have here mobile, even though it shouldn't be a thing, and mobile isn't a thing. As I said, mobile is just another way of publishing information. But in so many organizations these days, because of the rise of mobile and the interest we have in getting our information out to people, mobile is quite often seen as, this is special. This is the special child that gets all the goodies. It's the firstborn. We'll deal with all the others. We need to solve this problem. Yes, you do need to solve it. And maybe you solve it in the short term as something separate. But you need to make sure that it is not restricted to one group, not restricted to one area within the organization, but it goes across to all of them. It's not just publishing. It's not just marketing and support or sales or research or anything else. It is everything, because without that, it's going to fall apart. They're all facets of an overall strategy. You can implement one piece at a time, but don't preclude what you're doing by saying we're never going to do that, right? Without it, it's effectively a car crash. None of it works without the planning and the design up front. And I've just thrown this slide in, how do we stay out of that car crash, in honor of the fact that here in Toronto we got our first real snowfall of the year, all of 4 inches, and an absolute tip of the hat to the poor people in Buffalo in upstate New York who got between 3 and 4 feet of snow today. I'm glad I'm not there, because I know that they're having a bit of a problem. The key is, how do we currently deal with this? Well, to stay out of that car crash? Well, for mobile, we look at responsive design as a general rule. So what is responsive design? We've all heard about it. Well, responsive design started about 4 years ago now with an article in the wonderful blog A List Apart by Ethan Marcotte. What he talked about was, we don't always know how the information is being viewed on different devices, so we need to make it change depending on effectively what the device looks like and the size. Key to that is the device size, the screen size, the device orientation, whether it's vertical or horizontal, portrait or landscape mode, and the ability to get the same type of information across different screens. And you know something? That has made a huge change to the way we view information online. I really like responsive design. This is a website on an iPhone from a couple of years ago. I'm over this. When the iPhone came out, it had the best browser for its time. This was a game-changing thing. It wasn't a great phone, quite frankly, but it had a fantastic browser experience, because rather than seeing chopped up pieces of pages and pages falling out because the browsers on devices until that point really weren't very good, whether it was on a Palm or a Nokia device or a BlackBerry, they were terrible browsers. For the first time, you could actually see a web page that looked like something you would see on your desktop. But there are problems with this. It's impossible to read other than the headlines. In order to actually see something, you had to zoom into it and then scroll around, and when you do that, you lose the context of the page and what the designer was trying to do. It was great, it was awesome, it was game-changing, but it really doesn't work. Like, my eyes aren't that good. They were never that good, and they're certainly not that good now. Responsive design changes that and says, this is a small screen. I will display information that makes it easy to read it on a small screen. Now, there's some great things about this. You know, it's low bandwidth friendly. It only provides the information that you're looking for, that you want. You get to choose it as a user. I'm not really keen on the term user, but it is the one that we use. So on the user, the reader, they get to choose what they want. Are they looking for television? Are they looking for news, sports, or music? So you don't download stuff onto them initially. Now the key is, I know I've shown this slide to many, many people, and some people like the look of it, and other people just absolutely hate the look of it. But the key thing to remember is you need to ignore that visual design. Visual design is not the same as the design of the content. They're related. You only have about a quarter second when someone comes to your website, or when you go to a website. It takes less than a quarter second for you to go, I like that, and I will read it. Or I really don't like that, and I'm going to find something that's not as irritating on the eyes for me to read. So that's not a lot of time. So your visual design mustn't be horrible or hideous to the greatest number of people. But I don't think in most cases trying to get something that fits on a large 8.5 by 11 screen, for example, will work well. John Alsop, when he wrote The Tao of Web Design, talked about this, and actually Ethan Marcotte referenced it in his initial article, saying that this isn't paper. This is the web. We don't have the same constraints. We need to design for flexibility. First, we, quote, must accept the ebb and flow of things. Now, some visual designers, particularly those who worked a lot in manual or book design, graphic design for those printed mediums, have a real problem with this. And their goal is to make things look exactly like the page. There's an awful lot of e-books that are going that way, EPUBs. InDesign has recently released, now in the last couple of years, has the capability to produce an EPUB that looks just like the printed page. Sometimes that works. Sometimes it is the best way, but in many cases it's just, well, why don't I go with a regular book? So some designers have a real problem with this because they're uncomfortable with ceding that control to a device. Now, it's not always easy. Even when someone thinks about it, sometimes they just fail miserably, not because they're trying to, but because they're not thinking it through, or they're doing it wrong. So, for example, LG has released a new Android-powered watch. It's kind of cool. When you go to the website to see on a mobile device, an iPhone, when you go to their website, it tells you, oh, we've decided, you know, we've noticed that you're using a small screen. Rotate it for the optimal service. You know, that's just wrong. This is what it looks like on the iPhone when it's viewed. We have a page representation on a 4-inch screen. It's almost impossible. You can read it now because it's giant and blown up on your screen, but it's almost impossible to read when you're actually looking at it on the 4-inch screen. This is sort of design gone mad, visual design gone mad, rather than informational design. That does it incredibly enough. This is my laptop screen. This is the same thing you get when you bring up a regular browser on a big screen. It says, please squish your browser down to a horizontal aspect, and then we'll display it exactly the same way as it would on a piece of paper or on your tiny screen. The problem with this is that's not responsive design. They've done some response to it, responsive design, because they've said, how big is that screen? What are the display capabilities? And then forced me to respond to it. Now, I'll just quickly toot our own horn. This is responsive design done responsibly. What it does is, this is our website, an early version of a wireframe that shows you where the things are, where the semantic elements are, where the logo is, where our what we do is, where the announcements are, all of this type of stuff, the content, the menu items, where does it go, what does it look like? But it doesn't show you anything about what it looks like. It just tells you semantically what goes there. So this is what it looks like on a laptop. When you look at it on a widescreen device, or in this case an iPad mini in horizontal or landscape format, it looks like this. It changes slightly. It goes from 3 columns to 2, or 1 column with a sidebar when you do it on the same device vertically. And when you go on a smaller device, it changes things again. The menu changes. It says it's navigation. It doesn't make you guess what the little pancake thing is. It tells you, all that type of stuff. This is responsive design, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with this. It works really well. However, what if you need more functionality? This is good as far as it goes, but what if you need more? What if your content needs more capabilities? This is what adaptive content does. Now, I'm once again going to read something. So I guess it'd be my second page that I've read. This is how I define adaptive content in the Language of Content Strategy, Scott Abel and Rahel and Bailey's book from a couple of months ago. Adaptive content is content that adapts to the needs of the user or reader, responding not only to the screen size and orientation of the device, that's responsive design, but is aware of and takes advantage of the specific device capabilities, such as GPS, compass, magnometers, etc., to display content to the best advantage of the device. It is indeed related to responsive design, and responsive design is at the core, but adaptive design is going beyond to enhance the usability or capability of the content on a given device based on the capabilities of the device. The key differences between it and responsive design is it can know about where you are, your orientation, your movement, the capabilities of the device. If it's connected, how fast the speeds are. It can integrate content from other sources. It can save information differently. It is responsive, but it adapts to the capabilities of the device. And so what we talk about it is that it's limited only by the design decisions. That's the key thing, because without it, none of it will work. The capabilities of the device being used and the intelligence of your content, i.e. how you've tagged it, what metadata you've provided. So here's an example in an app form developed by GlaxoSmithKline in the UK. In many ways, it's a standard app for helping particular, well, it can have multiple people, but so it can track asthma, how you're feeling, how you're doing, what it's like. You can do some testing with it. The information can be sent to your healthcare provider so that they can be aware of it, your doctor, so that they can deal with it on a regular basis. You can save it, all of those cool things. But the important thing, what makes it adaptive, is that it actually knows where you are and goes out and finds out what the temperature is, what the pollution index is, the weather in general, what the pollen count is in your local area. It takes advantage of the capabilities of the device to know where you are, pull all of this stuff, and then it saves that information along with the information, the data that you provide, and then you can go to your doctor, and the two of you can say, oh, look, when the temperature is low, I have a problem. When the temperature is high, when there's a high pollen count, all of these things can be brought into what you're doing, and enables people to help. Enables a doctor to help the patient by knowing what their state was and what the environment in which they found themselves were. So how do you manage this? Well, you have to, as I said, you have to plan ahead. There's some basic questions you have to answer. What is mobile to you? Who is your audience? Where are they? And what does that mobile audience want? Remember this traditional web thing? That is not mobile. So we're not talking about that at all. What we're looking at, because that's no more mobile than these, right? That's just not mobile. That's not what we're talking about. What we're looking at are those other things on the left-hand side of that thing. So the mobile aware web, in particular, web apps and native apps. I'm not going to talk about ebooks, although that you can load information in them the same way. They tend to be captive, so we're not going to talk about that at all. So the mobile aware web responsive design is great. It lets you know how big the screen size is, the screen orientation, gives you progressive disclosure of information. For those who aren't familiar with the term, that means it provides only the amount of information you need to do a particular task or job, or the information you have requested. And as you proceed through a task or as you ask for new information, it will get you more information. It reduces the cognitive load. And it also reduces the amount of bandwidth, which is a great thing when you're dealing with mobile devices. The mobile aware web is great for adaptive design, obviously. You get all of the above, plus the location, the direction, all of those different things that you might need. Now, that depends on the browser you're using in that device, but that is definitely getting better with time. And then web apps are kind of halfway between an app and a web. It's effectively a customized browser so that you can control the content that people see. It brings them together, but you're still getting information from somewhere else. You're still getting it from the web. And of course, a native application, which gives you all the power, all the time, all the data. You can know anything that's possible within the constraints of the programming interface that you have for the device. And it's truly amazing what you can get from a device, from an app. This is an app that I love to use when I'm traveling. This is from San Francisco. You can see that the app, which is like a little surveyor's kit in a phone, knows where I am, my altitude, the time, the horizon, the angle of the phone, you name it, it knows about it. It can find out all sorts of things. So you can get all sorts of good information with an app. So the first thought when I explain this to people is, I go, well, I'm going to do an app. That sounds great because I can do everything. Well, there are problems. It's expensive. Now, it's a lot cheaper than it used to be, but it is still a very expensive thing to do an app. It is more expensive. And the reason for that is you don't just have to design and create the content for the back end that feeds into it, but you also have to come up with the visuals for it. You have to design for the particular product. You have to come up with the whole user experience and all of the testing. So creating the app itself is twice as expensive, at the very least, than going either a web app or a mobile web information delivery system, because there's simply so much more to do. It's also a problem because an app, unlike a web app or unlike a just a web browser, it only works on one device or family. So if you've created an app for the iThingy world, the Apple's iPhone, iPad, iMini, whatever world, it won't work on Android or Windows Phone devices. This is obvious. You're creating an app for a very specific device. In many cases, if you're dealing with the consumer market, this can be a problem unless you're willing to make an app for as many different devices as you think your customers might have. But if you're working on the physician or the research end, that may not be a problem because you have very, very specific devices that you can code for, and you're not really worried about it. So there are pluses and minuses on both of them. And the last sort of, I guess, real problem that I want to bring out is we always talk about designing the content separate from the style, from the look and feel. You don't want to define things in your code or in your content so it looks a particular font and a style and a leading and all of that stuff. That's done during the publishing. Now, in theory, even though when content creators, writers are writing for different devices, if they only have experience with one device, they will unconsciously write for that device, for that screen size, for that experience, because that's what they know. So it's important if you are doing either especially an app, but even if you're doing anything that's going to be delivered on small consumer devices, it's a good idea to inculcate your users, either your content creators with information. Let them have some extra devices so they can look at it and go, I understand what this is. It doesn't always look the same on each device. I need to get that out of my head. I need to think about the content, not what it looks like. This is exactly the same app. Nothing to do with medical, but it's the same app on two different devices, on a Windows phone and on an Apple phone. They look very, very different. They operate identically. So if you're writing for content, you do have to think about the fact that, yeah, I'm writing it without respect to what it looks like, but they probably still will be, and that's a training thing. So you have to think it through. You have to reimagine it on a regular basis. People expect their apps to be updated regularly. So apps are great. You might not want to do it. So you have to figure out what mobile means to you. Are you doing an app? Are you doing it for a web or for a web app? You have to think about that because it makes a difference. You also have to think about who your audience is. This is, in many ways, the most crucial part of it. Are they home users? Are they people who are sick or their loved ones who are caring for them? Are they healthcare professionals? That's a very different market right there. There's a huge difference there. But then within that, there's the subset. If they're a healthcare professional, what is their focus? Who are they? What is their level of expertise? What do they do? What do they do not only with their training, but what is their specialty? What are they doing that day? There's all sorts of things that you have to think about to make sure that you're providing the information that that audience wants. You have to think about where they're located. Are they in a hospital? Are they in the pharmacy within a hospital? Are they in a pharmacy at a drugstore? Are they a pharmacist? Are they a doctor? Are they a nurse? Are they picking something up? Are they in an EMS vehicle, in an ambulance? Are they actually, are they moving? Is the ambulance moving? Are they at a user's home? Is it, all of these different types of things are things that you have to think about, because it's absolutely key to ensure that people are able to get the information they want. So the information they want. Are they doing diagnostics? Do they need dosage information for a particular product? Is this training information? Is this remedial information bringing someone up to speed? Is it reference? Is it background? Are they looking for drug interactions? Do they need to be able to see more than one thing on the screen at a time? All of these things are things you have to think about. Do you know what device they have? If it's a home user, unless it's something you've created for them, you may not know the device that they have. Will you share information between a help information that lives in a blood glucose meter or that lives in an insulin pump? Do you want some of that information to be available on the web so that the information is shared between the two devices, not necessarily on a real-time basis, but for reuse, so that you're not telling them one thing on the web or one thing on an app and one thing in the package insert or product information and another thing within the, quote, help files that are available within the device. So all of these things is you have to think about what they're doing with it, where they're doing it. So you have to structure your content. This comes back to that planning. You have to structure your content with these needs in mind. Who is the audience? What is the location? Training. Are they connected? Do you know how they're connected? And then if they're connected via a cellular network or via Wi-Fi, you may decide to provide different information with that progressive disclosure. Is asking them, oh, I know that you're on a slow connection. Do you want to download this video? Yes or no? Is a camera, and there's all sorts of things that you need to think about. Who, what, where, when, why. All of those things that will enable you to deliver the content that you want. But without it, it's not going to work. It's the old garbage in, garbage out from the 1950s programming. Without it segmented, identified, and tagged, you won't be able to provide the information, right? This guy, the doctor who's in the emergency center, working with a critical situation, in that little animation was some fellow that had a stroke, and they're trying to deal with it. He needs information, but he needs very different information than a senior citizen at home who's dealing with a chronic situation. He needs to know information about blood pressure, background on it, what the expected ranges are, what his expected ranges are, and if it's out of that, what remedial action to take. Is it something they have to deal with immediately? Is it something you can deal with in a couple of hours? All of that stuff. They both need information on blood pressure, but it's very, very different level of information and a different focus of the information that they want. So once you've made those decisions and your content is ready, you can start implementing it. And what the goal is effectively when you're delivering it, once the design is done, when you're delivering it, is to figure out what sort of non-foam, what cool, neat capabilities a particular device has, and how can you display your information to take advantage of that. So you're looking for things, again, this is all designed up front. If we find this information will be provided as opposed to not. So you're looking at motion sensors. They measure acceleration, rotation, movement. So all of those things are important. Environmental sensors, what the temperature is. You may have pressure, photometers, barometers, humidity. There's all sorts of devices that different phones and whatnot have these days that you can build into the app, the capabilities to read it if you need it. Where it is, position sensors. So where are they? In which direction are they looking? Is that important? Now, technically, it's actually not that hard to do, and it's getting much easier than it used to be. You probably, if you're doing it on the website, as they say, content separate from style, don't have fixed fonts, don't have fixed images. I mean, for years we've been setting a font size. We've been setting an image size. Well, using new technologies, it's fairly simple to actually figure out how big the screen is, and render both the fonts and the images as a percentage of that rather than fixing the font size. It's simple to do, requires thought beforehand, but it really, really works. Media overlays you can use to either stream information, to know what's available to stream and what. There's all sorts of technologies out there that will help you do it. And if you're doing it on the website, it's getting so much better than it was even a couple of years ago. The WC3 consortium has got some fantastic new standards out there that when the APIs are fully implemented, you'll be able to determine whatever the phone has, provided the phone maker allows that. Right now, for example, it can be sometimes difficult to determine whether or not what the speed is without doing some sniffer tests. You can determine whether or not a user is using Wi-Fi or a cellular, but determining what the speed is can be difficult to find out. But all of these things are getting better. So, for example, the geolocation issue is now pretty much solved on all of the devices. Now, it's solved on all of the devices with a caveat. Not all devices have all of these, and this can be a surprise sometimes. The Windows RT tablet, for example, did not have a GPS, despite the fact that it was a tablet with a keyboard. This is a photo of a Nokia Windows 520, and it doesn't have a compass or a gyroscope. So all of those things that you might want to do with that device, and most people think all phones have these, this phone doesn't have it. So the key is you have to make a medical and business decision to determine what happens if your information cannot or is going out to a customer or consumer who doesn't have a device that can do all of the bells and whistles. What do you do? What information will be shown on a minimal device? Again, it's not really a technological problem. It's a planning and design issue that you have to deal with. But when you can do it, as I said, there are tools available through the APIs. Just ask the device, how big is your screen? Well, sometimes the devices are not 100% accurate, but they're pretty good. And getting information back like this lets you know not just how big the screen is and its orientation, but enables you then to display the content with a different size of font or a different different size of image, or make a choice that you won't show an image at a particular size because it's not worth it. So there's all of these things that you can do with an app rather than a web browser or web app. You can do anything pretty much that the manufacturer of the device allows you to do, but it can, there are the challenges, as I said, but it's not about the device. It's not about it's about the capabilities of the device, and it's about you designing your information up front to do it. So are they doing it? Yeah, and sometimes some organizations are doing everything. Like we've all heard of Webmd. It's a very well-recognized site out in the world, despite, you can see the ads here, signs of low testosterone. They're a very highly regarded site amongst the public to get information. They have traditional sites. They have websites. They have ads and everything. They have apps, that are widely recognized and are downloaded. For example, their web allergy app is a very much designed as an adaptive app using adaptive design and content, because it actually gathers the local information, like the one I showed from GlaxoSmithKline in England. It gathers information about where you are, what's happening in your environment, saves it, and you can share that with your medical provider, because it knows where you are, and it bundles all of that information together. And of course, a lot of companies these days are also using augmented reality. So depending on the capabilities of the device, the feed out to the network, data that's built into it, they can actually do things like overlay information on top of the actual screen. And this was early last year, where they were doing using augmented reality to show where the blood vessels are in a liver as they were doing cancer surgery, as we know that the liver is basically blood vessels, so you want to make sure you stay away from the big ones and deal with the small ones as you need to. So there's all sorts of information that we can get, and people are using this, provided the design has been done up front. You need to know who your customers are, what their needs are. If possible, What does mobile mean to you and your customers, and what are you trying to do? Know what those device constraints are that people are using, if you can. For the consumer market, it's very difficult, but for obviously the professional, the HCP market, that's much easier. You need to develop the business rules that enable you to map your content strategy to the deliverables. Do we provide all of this information? Do we provide it to different groups? How do we do it? Who wants it? Who gets it? What are their capabilities? What's their training? And before all of that, to make all of that work, is you develop an intelligent content strategy, which includes the content models, where the content will be used, who's reusing it, where it will be reused, all of its functionality, and the metadata that enables you to make those decisions. Who they are, what is their audience, what do they want, why are they getting it, all of those things that I showed you a brief excerpt of there in that little spreadsheet. That's the sort of stuff that we absolutely need to have, is a design up front, and then you need the tools to actually implement this, because you cannot do this by hand and using little scraps of paper. This does require some pretty good tools in order to make it work. So with that, and it's 8 minutes left on our schedule, I'm ready to head back to Adam and see if we have any questions from the audience.
Great. Well, thank you, Charles. This has definitely been a very informative webinar. The first question that has come in is, what's the difference between a web page versus a web app? They sound the same. Why would I choose one over the other?
It's about control. The web app is effectively you create your own browser. It contains no information, but it contains all of the interactivity that you might want your app to do, your app to have, and all of the links out to the data that people are expected to get. It gives you some control, because if you're working on an iPhone, they might be using the built-in one, they may be using Safari, or they may be using Chrome, or whatever has been copied onto the device, and you lose some of the control when you're dealing with it. You also have the ability, if it's the web, you don't necessarily have the ability to save information. You can build that into a web app, but it gives you control, and it makes it less likely that someone's going to, do the squirrel thing, wander off and find something else in the web. They're more likely to stay within your product. And actually, web apps are they're at an interesting place right now. They're less popular than they used to be. People are going more to the full-blown apps because of the control, and the cost of apps are going down. But it's still something you have to think about. Effectively, a web page is whatever browser they want viewing the information you're providing. A web app is a captive browser that looks like you want it to look like, and again, providing the information you want.
Excellent. Thank you very much. The next question, Charles, is augmented reality seems really hot right now, but I can't see any need to implement it in any of my content. Is this something I should be concerned about?
In the long term, perhaps, but definitely not in the short term. If there's no reason to implement something, don't. All of this comes down to a business decision. What will meet your needs and the needs of your customers? Sometimes we get enthused with the bright and shiny, the new, the cool things we can do. If you don't need it, don't implement it. It takes time. It costs money. Don't do it unless you have a really good business reason for it. On the other hand, don't look at it and say, oh, we're never going to do that. Revisit it on a regular basis, maybe once a year, and say, there are new capabilities of the devices, there's new capabilities in our device, in our product, that maybe we want to do this. There are more and more cars, for example, that have not their service manual, but their user's manual in phones, rather than on the paper, because people don't look at the paper, but they're willing to use an app to point it at something in their car to find out what it does. So it's not necessary. It might be a nice to have, but don't sweat it if it's not something that works for you.
Great. Thank you, Charles. The next question is, our customers are mostly retired people who aren't comfortable with computers. We're pretty sure that they are not even reading the printed information half the time. Mobile is the furthest thing from my mind right now. Can it just wait?
Yeah, I mean, it can just wait. If your customers aren't using it, yes, but keep this in mind. Excuse me. Our customers are getting older, but as they get older, the people who are more familiar with the technology, and that's just not 12-year-olds, that's 50-year-olds, they are getting more and more comfortable with using technology on a daily basis, as some of those statistics I showed right at the beginning of the hour point out. So you may not need it now. Maybe you want to think about it in the future. So once again, like a business decision, revisit it. But when you're, something else to keep in mind though is if you are considering structuring information for mobile or considering restructuring your information, changing it, updating it, it's probably a good idea to keep that in mind for future, because if it works on mobile, it'll work in other ways as well. Straight to the point, clear writing, structured writing, all of those things that are required for mobile are also good for non-mobile information presentation.
Thank you. The next question is, how do I test my content to see if the adaptiveness is working?
I guess the best way to do it is, once again, if you have your own, if it's a captive device that is very specific, such as head-mounted AR displays and stuff like that, well then obviously you will test it using that. You'll figure out, create use cases. How do we know, we have a physician who will be using this in a particular situation, so you duplicate those situations within a test situation and actually use it. If it is consumer information that you're expecting to go out without any specialized hardware, then most of your work can actually be done using emulators because they're doing some pretty good work with those. But when you're actually testing for full adaptiveness, such as where am I and does it actually work, I strongly recommend that you buy a bunch of devices. Now, you don't have to buy every device in the world. There are over 5,000 different Android devices alone right now. But it's a useful thing to look at your target market. Are they likely to have this? Are they likely to have that? Do some work with your sales and marketing people. Find out, because they know, or they'll have a very good idea as to what they're looking at and what people will have, and buy a couple of devices. You don't have to buy the brand new one. As a matter of fact, sometimes buying the brand new one is a problem. If we target our information for the latest and greatest capabilities of a particular device, you'll find that not everyone has it, or they haven't updated, or in some cases on an Android device, it may never get updated. So it's probably a good idea to have a couple of devices, a handful, something as I refer to as my petting zoo, that enables me to test this on various things. To me, that is the acid test. Actually test it on a device. Yes, using the situations and all of the parameters, but actually test it on the physical device. Because if you're spending thousands of dollars to create content, hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars on a device and all of the back-end stuff in the clinical trials, don't shortchange yourself for the cost of, $500, $200, $1,000 for a few devices. Now, that being said, if you're a small organization just getting into this field, you don't have to buy everything. Go around the office. We've had organizations who do this. They have sort of an informal test situation where they know what everyone in a group of 30 or 40 people have that they can test things on. Most things don't need to be tested on every device, but before things are released, they arrange for a couple of hours or even 20 minutes for some structured testing. It's not ad hoc testing. It's very structured. They know exactly what they're doing on each device and what they're looking for. They just don't own the devices. They borrow the devices for a couple of hours and get a good feel as to whether or not it's going to work.
All right, thank you, Charles. Last question is, excuse me, due to government regulations, I have to deliver instructions on paper. Why should I have to think about adaptable content?
I guess once again, it's the same sort of thing. Yes, you do have to deliver. In many of our clients have to deliver content on paper. But some cases they know that the paper isn't being read. So they want to be able to deliver it in multiple ways because they have customers who are looking for it. People are actually asking for it. How come I don't have an app? Why do I have to read this? The stuff on this little piece of paper that's the size of a tablecloth is in 2-point type and I can't read that. Why can't I see it on my iPad? That sort of thing. It can be done in addition to rather than as a replacement for. It's just remember, it's not mobile is not a strategy. Mobile is just another way of publishing. And if you have a system that can keep track of these things and say, here's all this information, we've built this documentation that goes with something, or this documentation that describes the dosages for this particular drug, and we print it out, we publish it, it's all approved, it's published, and it goes out to the web. It's in some form, it's going out to the paper. You can also publish to a mobile device or a mobile app. So what I'm saying is it's not either or. It can be disregarded as yet another way of doing it, provided you've designed and structured your information and written so that the way it looks is separated from the actual content. You don't have to worry about that. When you publish it, you can publish it to all these different modalities.
Great. Well, thank you, Charles. And thank you, everyone, for attending this webinar. This will conclude today's broadcast. You'll be able to access the recorded version of this webinar in the archives section of our website at www.dclab.com. Our next webinar will be on Wednesday, December 10th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, titled Back to Basics, Getting the Content Essentials Right, being presented by Carrie Ann Gilloway, a content strategy consultant. Thank you, everyone, for attending, and have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.